Dear participants, dear colleagues, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for coming back. Once again, we are here with a weekly ERCP US webinar. And I'm really thankful to Professor Lonso from Singapore that he has consented to be part of our program, although he has always been part of our program, being one of the co-sponsoring host, Asian Endoscopic Ultrasound Group, and he has been um, supervisor of the AEG ever since its inception. And I'm really thankful for him because it's 9 p.m. over there in Singapore that he has spared his time, he's spared his family time. It's Sunday and it's almost bedtime as well. He's going to highlight on a very important aspect, and that is training opportunities in endoscopic ultrasound and role of the Asian Endoscopic Ultrasound Group. Please feel free to post your questions in the question answer site, or maybe you can send your questions directly on my email or on my WhatsApp as well, or to Sadnias. Over to you, Lovis.
Okay, thanks a lot, Professor Gyas, for this very kind introduction. Indeed, I think we have been associated for many years. Yeah, in the early days, I think I used to go to both Lahore as well as Karachi, and enjoy the hospitality by both of you, Gyas as well as Saad. I think, yeah, just recently, obviously, I think we have not been able to meet as much in Pakistan. But I do hope that I think in times to come, in better times, then we will have the chance again to meet up and then enjoy some coffee, late night coffee and curry and so forth. So anyway, I think, yeah, it's been great being invited to share some things on some tips on the training in US during your particular very interesting weekly webinars in US as well as ERCP. So I think I'd like to basically share with you a few, I think, of what my own thoughts about the training opportunities of US, as well as I think what little role the Asian US group has played in promoting those, I think, these training opportunities. So I think just on this particular topic of US, obviously I think all of us know that I think compared with OGD as well as colonoscopy, EUS certainly is a much more challenging procedures to learn. And it's indeed been shown that the learning curve is actually less, I think, more prolonged, and also I think require a lot more competency, chiefly because I think there are two aspects to performing EUS. One is the mechanical aspects, and the other one obviously is the cognitive aspects. So we have to become competent in both the manipulation as well as in interpreting the images as good as our radiological colleagues. Because of these challenges, I think many people has spoken about the two aspects of learning of EUS. One is a so-called formal learning, where you get attached to a particular unit and then you undergo training within that unit. And the other way to get trained in EUS is to do so-called, I think, immersion in workshop training. So I think for this evening's talk, I'm going to mostly focus on the workshop training, because this is something that which we can actually contribute quite actively. So in terms of formal training, obviously I think this is the ideal. Unfortunately, I think in many parts of the Asia Pacific region, I think formal training is still hard to come by, both in terms of people who can actually provide this sort of training, as well as in trainees not able to take time off from their usual work and say spending time in big centers to do the formal training. So I think a number of years ago, we did a survey among experts in the Asia Pacific region and found that I think not many people, if you look at the percent, not many people were actually trained formally, even in those days when I think we have a lot of these pioneers, so-called pioneers of today, and they actually did not learn through the formal training route. So this is why I think we recognize that there, there is an unmet need in terms of complement or alternative to this sort of formal training. So I think that's where number of years ago, as Professor Gyas did mention, and we came up with this idea. Perhaps I think as a region, we should all come together and create a platform where we can actually provide more structured training in EUS. And that was when this concept of the Asian US group was actually born, officially formed in August of 2012. So essentially the idea is very simple. We needed to create a sort of a training where I think the experts could contribute freely and the trainees could benefit as well in a very matching process. So that came about, and to our surprise, in fact, and that definitely to my surprise, I didn't expect that over the years, I think we have grown quite tremendously, and currently almost all countries in Asia are represented within the group, and we have 75 members, 75 member centers from 20 countries which participate very actively in the Asian US group. So I think if you ask me what has actually contributed to the effectiveness of this sort of training program, I would actually mention three key components. Sorry. So why is the Asian US group's workshop so well differentiated? Okay, I believe that three things happen which make the particular workshop very attractive to trainees in this region. One is the hands-on, I think, practice, which is almost essential in the Asian US group of workshops. And secondly, we also put a lot of emphasis on assessment, meaning that we need to actually be able to demonstrate that the trainees actually learn something. So this becomes a sort of a yardstick for us to know that we are actually doing the right thing. And third thing is, I think the constant reinvention of our workshops, meaning that we try our best to individualize the programs to suit the unmet needs of the trainees. So I think I'm just going to spend a bit of time going through these three key components of the Asian US group workshop. And hopefully, I think people can also then use the same kind of components in their own workshops elsewhere, I think in Pakistan and also in their own hospitals. So essentially, I think many people obviously know that if you just sort of do live case demos or you just simply listen to lectures, I think the learning effectiveness may not be as real as having some sort of hands-on training. So this is why we recognize this, the importance of hands-on training very early on and introduce this as a key or component of our workshops. So I think at that time, the early years when we started this sort of workshops in many countries, we struggled to come up with training models. So we started off with a lot of animal models. Then it became a bit impractical because I think it's expensive. And secondly, I think some countries may not have access to certain animals which are suitable for training. So I think gradually we went into ex vivo. And then finally, in the more recent times, we started using a lot of models. So which became very mature and also a lot of commercial models for us to start to let the trainees practice their skills on this phantoms as well as a navigation system. So I think this is something that I think a lot of trainees enjoy. And then the trainers as well will actually be able to teach more effectively. So I think with this sort of evolution over the years, I think since 2012, I think many countries, many centers have conducted the so-called local workshops where they actually organize these workshops in their own centers. I think we have conducted more than 100 and also have trained more than a few thousand doctors over the region. And the numbers are still increasing. So I think, obviously, I think Professor Gyas as well as Dr. Sai are very active trainers. They also are champions in their own centers. And I remember, I think shortly after we formed in 2012, and then in February of 2013, just shortly after we formed, I mentioned before, the AEG was formed in October, or is that August? Okay, 2012. And a few months later, in fact, Pakistan organized the first basic workshop over in Lahore, and I actually came. So this is a picture, I think, of our training in Lahore, and then obviously I think we have these pictures. I think you know that Sham was also here, and then Mohammed also came as well. So we have quite a kind of group, big group. I think you can recognize. I think the younger looking and very good looking, yes, and then also Sai. Okay, so I think we actually certainly enjoyed the first workshop, and since then, obviously, I think the Pakistan group has continued to organize many different workshops, including interventional EUS workshops, almost on a yearly basis. I think the last one was held just in October last year. So you can see the training, I think both in using live models as well as those training models. So I think I'm sure many trainees over in Pakistan have had the opportunities to benefit from these workshops. So I think then moving on, hands-on is the one key component. And the other component, I believe, is actually the assessment. I think it's very important to make sure that I think trainees know that they will be in some ways assessed before and after the training. And I guess I think assessment is both an evil kind of training method, but on the other hand, if you think about the positive aspects, assessment is actually very important because it does give us a sense that yeah, this training is actually has to be taken seriously, both by the trainees as well as trainer. So I think that people will put in more effort to try to learn properly. And this is why I think we had been using a sort of this sort of format, and then we have a question bank where we kind of change the sort of questions in every different workshops, so that I think we know where the trainee stand at the beginning and also after the training, how much their knowledge and as well as the skills have improved. So if you look at this particular study we conducted quite a number of years ago on many different trainees over in many different workshops, and certainly we managed to demonstrate that I think our form of this sort of just the lectures already benefited a lot of trainees. And you can see that there's improvement in their knowledge after the workshops compared with before the workshop. And similarly, I think we also assess the skill of the trainees. If you look at it, this is left video shows the sort of image quality of a trainee before they were actually taught. And the right video shows the after image, after they were actually trained. You can see the difference. I think obviously, I think after the hands-on training, I think the trainees improved. And in fact, we demonstrated using a particular model called Ikuma model that most trainees, in fact, improved, okay, after they were trained using this particular format. And if you look at it, basically there are two bars here, and the left, the red bar shows the sort of success in locating certain structure within 2 minutes. Okay, so before the training, most trainees struggle to actually locate specific structures within 2 minutes. And certainly after the training, using this particular model, I think 80% trainees succeeded in locating certain structures such as pancreatic celiac axis, and so forth, I think within 2 minutes. So I think that actually gives us a lot of confidence, obviously. I think that our form of workshops are reaping certain outcomes, at least shortened outcomes. I think in a sense that I think at the end of this sort of 2 days workshop or even 1 day workshop, at least I think they have learned something. Either the knowledge has improved or the skills have actually improved to some extent. Obviously, I think this sort of workshops are very short term, but certainly I think the fact that there's an assessment going on, I think does actually help the trainees to learn something according to what we call learning objectives. So I think we also have introduced in recent times, I think the digital kind of form of assessment, where I think they were asked to look at certain things and then they score. And then this sort of digital format gives us the opportunity to provide instant feedback as to how good they are before and after the training. And in fact, you can see from this video, you can actually explain even after the questions. I think we could explain to the trainees exactly why they make mistakes and so forth, and then we would explain to them the correct answers and then why those answers are the correct answers. So I think this is sort of the way we try to actually go through our training. So I think that's the kind of thing. Then finally, we did actually manage to pull together some of those results I mentioned before into a publication. I think that was something that I think certainly helps. I think a lot of other centers to do a more so-called structured training program in terms of EOS. So moving on, I would like to spend a bit more time on this so-called, I think, our individualized programs. So I think this is a very important aspect of the AEG training format, because I think we know that when a person starts to learn, a trainee starts to learn a particular procedures or skills, they would actually certainly, hopefully, I think they will improve with time. And then as they improve, obviously their training requirements, okay, also evolve. In fact, they need more training in more advanced procedures. And that's where if we just simply provide one kind of a cross-sectional training, then we will not be able to move along with the trainees in terms of their need. And this is why we kind of over time, as the entire region matures, and then we find that increasingly many countries have already advanced further in their skills, in their also in terms of their kind of applications of EUS. Then we started coming up with new kind of programs to cater for the needs of this increased appetite, so as to speak. So I think the first kind of venture into this sort of individualized programs is actually in coming up with this so-called advanced programs. And this is where we thought it is sometimes not possible for us to be able to send experts to the different countries and over a longer period of time, because I think our workshops are still very short term. And then we decided that rather than just coming up with this sort of very short term weekends kind of courses, we would rather actually expose the more advanced people, the more experts, and make them actually trainers in their own countries. So I think then with this sort of concept came the implementation, where we decided to establish a number of so-called centers of excellence. Okay, so for instance, I think over in Pakistan, so we say that okay, maybe we should have 2 experts in Pakistan to become the masters, like Professor Gyas and Dr. Saad. And then we would then ask them to say, okay, you are in charge of this training in Pakistan, and then you are kind of like the trainers, the master trainers, and then you will then be asked to go through the formal training. So this way, we actually establish a number of centers of excellence which undertake this sort of train the trainers courses. And these courses are usually very small group, six in a group, and then they are quite intensive over maybe one longer period of time, about 1 week. So I think those centers which started were uh, uh, included like in Japan, in China, as well as in Hong Kong. And obviously, I think we came up with a few centers first to sort of pilot our concept. And then as time goes, I think more centers have since cropped up, including those in Korea as well as in India. So I think over time also, I think certainly we have enjoyed success. And also I think the other way of giving more advanced training is actually in terms of training in the trainees' own centers. For instance, I think I did spend some time over in Indonesia training Rinaldi. And since then, I think obviously he has already graduated. He's now an expert in Jakarta. So I think this is where sometimes I think certain trainees wants to go into in-depth training, and then both the trainer courses as well as the proctorship may potentially provide this sort of more advanced tailored training courses. So the other one which has come up is because the situation has demanded that we begin to do interventional EUS. And obviously, I think interventional EUS is a totally different game because you know that interventional procedures are more risky. They also carry increase in terms of complications compared with conventional EUS. So that's where I think because of this risk, as well as I think the failure, the chances of failure, we decided that maybe I think our training method should be a bit different. Okay, it may not be possible to do hands-on just using the traditional models, and because of that reasons, different centers at that time came up with different so-called training models. And in fact, we as a group also came up with the consensus guidelines in terms of interventional EUS. And in the guidelines, we came up with a sort of a recommendation about how we can actually transmit skills in interventional EUS. And then after going through the literature, we believe that interventional EUS skills should be best acquired in a stepwise fashion, starting with observation in high volume centers, and then the trainees should then practice what they learn from observation in training models. And finally, obviously, they should start performing this procedure in patients under supervision. So this is where I think we came up with this or a few centers started proposing the school concept. Okay, so one of the kind of so-called school, the early schools was actually formed in Mumbai under the leadership of Vinay. So he came up with this kind of model where the trainees could be attached to his center for a number of weeks. And after that, once they learn enough, they will go back to their own centers and then come back in another term, say a few months later, and go through another kind of more advanced kind of thing. And then after that, they go back and so forth. It's almost like a school term, okay? So obviously, I think this sort of training program will have to have a certain syllabus so that I think the trainees know exactly what they expect to learn over a longer period of time intermittently. Okay, so why we separate the kind of thing into different terms is because I think most trainees will not be able to leave their own workplace for too long. So the best we could kind of offer is to have this kind of attachment over a short period, but then over, I think, frequently over a longer period of time. So I think the initial school in Mumbai was quickly followed by a similar school in Seoul under the auspices of the WEO as well. Obviously, I think AEG also supported the Seoul school both in terms of supply of faculty as well as to some extent financially. So I think with the initial things and we started the school, then I think came the next step, which is to come up with certain models which can facilitate hands-on training in interventional EUS. So I think those sort of models were quickly uh, designed and then deployed in many of the AEG interventional workshops because as the AEG workshop is actually hands-on training. Because at that time, we did not have too many training centers started coming up with their own training models. So for instance, I think the group in Hong Kong under Anthony Teo designed this pseudosys model many, many years ago, okay, which is quite realistic. So you use an ex vivo model and then he just kind of wrap it up and then came up with this thing which could mimic so-called pseudosys and allow the trainees to actually practice doing the drainage on this model. And later on, Toby also came up with his own version of the pseudosys, which is, I guess, is slightly, I think, also is easier to build apparently. And then he would go to different workshops, and then he'll workshops. Okay, so he kind of assembled the different organs and so forth, and into a very quite a realistic kind of model. And Keter decided that he would use a more sort of a more reproducible form of model, okay, which is water-filled balloons. And his model is also very popular because it can be easily replaced, okay. And once the pseudosys is actually used, and then you can replace with new pseudosys model and so forth. So I think this has been the kind of model we use in many trainers courses as well. And moving on from the pseudosys model, I think we then wanted to do something called the delivery drainage. And then came these models, which initially started with 3D printing model, but we didn't find it particularly useful. So I think from there, I think the model kind of evolved into a hybrid model, which is part 3D and part not 3D. So I think and that is the model used in the Mumbai training courses for the delivery drainage as well. So I think I believe that this is how this sort of I was also had the privilege of doing one of those things as a trainee as well to see how good this sort of training models were. And then this is on CDS as well as rendezvous procedures using the Mumbai model. Okay, so I think in India models you could also actually practice under fluoroscopy. So this is quite, in some ways, I think it gives you the idea, may not be so realistic, but it does expose your training to the so-called the standard operating procedure as well as the workflow about how to do all these interventional procedures. So I think Kida also came up with this thing. Again, I think Japan's group tend to be a bit more high-tech, so they want reproducibility, so they came up with this sort of or even manufacturable models which can be replaced and so forth. Again, using this sort of balloon and so forth, water-filled balloon in order to, so that these models can be replaced as the trainees actually practice more and more. So finally, I think I'd just like to more or less finish my talk on the, I think what actually has occurred, I think during this COVID-19, which I think affects, which has affected almost all countries in this world. So as we know, I think 2020 is an extraordinary time. I think we were doing quite well for 8 years. We had a very good run of the good run for about 8 years, doing our usual workshops and so forth. Then we didn't actually expect that. I think this year, I think our training activities could really grind to a halt, almost. Okay, because I think with the COVID-19 comes social distancing. Okay, although I believe that in Pakistan, I think this is already we are still having to practice social distancing in Singapore. I believe that I think in many countries, I think travel is still restricted somewhat. So because of that reason, I think we have to evolve essentially. But the training has to continue though, okay? But the method may have to be modulated or modified to suit the situation. So this is where I think in the last few months, I think a few key members, Vinny Deal and Anthony Teo, they came up with they took their own initiative to come up with this so-called Aeg Webinars, which are organized almost every month. Okay, the first one was done in Mumbai, where Vinny focused mostly on BD drainage. And the second one was done in Hong Kong. Again, I think Anthony did all sorts of intervention. Okay, so I think the sort of thing that I think they managed to do is I think from just a very Asian-centric workshop, they open it up to a more international faculty and audience. And the last one was just basically lectures on a very specific topic, which is sense. So I think must say that these webinars have been really successful. I believe that they did a assessment and then or rather a survey. I think many trainees found the webinars extremely useful. Okay, so if you can see that, I think obviously I think webinars have advantage over the traditional workshops in the sense that I think the reach is actually broader, and we could also, I think, reach out to people even beyond the workshops. In the sense that I think today's webinar, I believe that I think it's going to reach out through the Facebook as well. And then after that, you can record and show it again to those people who unfortunately may not have the time or during that time to watch this sort of, to attend these webinars. So I think if you can see that, I think we had a lot of registrants, a lot of participants for all these webinars. So it just basically tells us that there's still a very huge unmet need for EOS in this region, and then I think it's just a really we are very fortunate. AEG has a lot of very enthusiastic trainers who are willing to contribute their time to meet this unmet need. So I think with that, obviously, I think for today's webinar, again, it's a classical example of how I think Professor Gyas and Dr. Sa have taken their Sunday. I think it's Sunday, the time, I think despite the very heavy schedules, I think no sleep from looking after liver transplant patients as well. And then here they are, I think, organizing this sort of webinar for the benefit of trainees. I really applaud their efforts. So I think it is this sort of spirit, and also I think these champions that made, I think, training in endoscopy, particularly EOS, so I think so effective for the region. Especially, I think we are very proud. I think Asia has come a long way, and many countries, I think from the West, have actually commented that I think we have done a lot more compared with the West in terms of EOS training, as well as in terms of the evolution of EOS. So I think I must say that I think this is all kind of a part and parcel of the very collective efforts by many trainers. So I'd just like to finish my talk today by summarizing a few key points. And firstly, I believe that workshop training should be trainee centric. Okay, and then we should think about the trainees as a center, and then because of this particular concept of trainees centricity, we believe that we do need to come up with a structured program with learning outcomes and learning objectives. So this is why we believe that AEG formal training has actually attracted many good, reviews over the years. And in terms of the organizing the training workshops, I believe that we should try to remember certain key components, which include the availability and hands-on training opportunities, and then and also I think the before and after assessment to make sure that people know where their mistakes are made, and also as the trainees become better and better in their knowledge and skills, I think we should also offer individualized programs to suit their needs. Okay, so that they can advance gradually from the beginning level to the more advanced, and finally, I think to even doing interventional procedures for those who are interested. And lastly, interventional skills are tough, and they also are are not without risk. So I believe that these sort of skills are best acquired in through observation of many cases in high volume centers and follow again by hands-on training in models. And then the last point I like to make is obviously today we are having this webinars, and now obviously this is the most practical way for us to continue to learn, even given this current pandemic, which we know is still affecting many countries in this world. So I think with that, I hope our trainees today will at least able to understand where we are coming from and why we are still doing the things we are doing in our own little time. With that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you for a very nice presentation. It was lovely to hear from you, the Chief Executive of AEG, and you have given a very nice perspective of the AEG in terms of training, mentorship, and the available opportunities. On this forum, we have the partnership with the educational institutes like University of Health Sciences, College of Physician Surgeons, University of Health Sciences, and obviously all the trainees in these institutes, they're interested in one thing, that after they've done their basic fellowship in their gastroenterology, what opportunities they have to learn hands-on or under direct mentorship elsewhere in the world for the students in Pakistan. And number of students have put up this question directly to me to request you to guide everyone on this aspect, that where can they go once they have acquired the basic skills in endoscopy? Is there any opportunity in the Asia Pacific region where they may go for 3 months or 6 months, or is there any possibility that AG can organize this kind of arrangement with these educational institutions?
Yes. So I think this question obviously is very pertinent to many people who are extremely keen to learn EUS or to become better EUS practitioners. So I think certainly we believe that trainees who are really good, I think should be given the opportunity to become even better. Okay, those who are committed to learning. And this is where the Asian US group can serve as the platform to try to link people. Okay, so we believe that we are also a former network. Okay, where we say that for instance, locally, Professor Gyas and Dr. Sai, they have to help us to identify who they think have the potential, because we want to actually have people who's going to go back to their own countries or their centers to serve the people in Pakistan. So I think upon the recommendation, obviously we'll kind of look at their level of training at the moment, and then we will just tailor something. So if they're still basic, obviously, I think they will continue to do the basic one, both in Pakistan and elsewhere. I think then the opportunity will be for these people, the more advanced people, to be sent over to, say, the centers of excellence. Okay, I think the centers of excellence, we intentionally have a variety of these centers so that I think you can be exposed to one or two, depending on the demand. So then to see the varieties. So after once they get to know these people, you see, I think if you look at it, the centers of excellence is not only a way to learn it for 2 weeks or 1 week, but it's also a way for them to expose to these mentors. Okay, if the mentors like them, they can actually talk to them at that time to say that, can I actually spend a bit more time? Say, for instance, Keeder's unit, so that they can spend a bit longer for those more junior trainee and so forth. So I think then you also can talk to the other faculty in the centers of excellence at that time, and then try to actually do up a kind of a network. Okay, if people are willing to accept you, obviously, well and good, then they can go to the centers of thing. And then finally, I think for those people who are highly recommended by whoever they are teachers, I think we can help the AEG to link them up to certain centers who are willing to train.
Lawrence,
I think the connection got lost.
yeah, I think lost you.
But I think we have gone a long way on the AG platform in Civil Hospital Karachi, similarly Lahore, Rawalpindi, and other centers, just from the sensitization about the utility of EUS and the role of EUS in the management of the patients to this level. Uh, we have made a significant journey, and important thing is that we need to continue with the help of the international organizations like AEG and other bodies. AEG has been very generous in the extent that they have been sponsoring one faculty along with the donor equipment. They have been sending the donor equipment and a faculty member on regular basis to Lahore as well as Karachi. In that context, I think AEG and the platforms that they have provided, uh, they've been they've done wonderfully well in sensitization and imparting knowledge and sharing the expertise and development of the expertise in the juniors in Pakistan up till now.
Okay, there's a question here which we can address. Are there any EUS fellowships available for entries in current pandemic in Pakistan? The answer, as far as I know, and you would agree, is currently no. Actually, EUS fellowship, as far as
I guess EUS fellowship,
does
advanced
not.
endoscopy offered by at least one center, although it is not certified by any university program, but their own institute, they do certify. Shaukat Khanum Hospital does offer the advanced fellowship, advanced endoscopy fellowship in their own center. But as far as I know, other than that, there's no other center which offers these training programs.
So what we have done in our center, as you know, is that for now we are focusing on ERCP. So we have these 4 months fellowship. Oh, hi, Lawrence is back.
Sorry, yeah,
Lawrence, in your absence, we were just discussing. I think I'll also take this opportunity to tell everybody who's here that Lawrence has really supported us. Pakistan, when I say us, is for a very long time, for as long as I know, really. Since I've come back from UK, I've seen Lawrence here supporting us in every way. And he's gone a long way in also supporting us for the EUS training. Both Riaz and I are really, very, very grateful. And he puts in a lot of effort, this AEG management and the way it supports us. We were in your absence, Riaz was saying that the workshops that we do, we're supported by AEG for faculty and equipment as well. So without that, obviously it would be very difficult, or probably maybe not possible. Lawrence, a question that comes to my mind is that EUS has its role um, in dealing with, um, you know, whether you do FNA or FNBs and obviously diagnostics still, um, do you think that in your experience, everybody who is doing EUS should be going to EUS DD and advanced procedures? Or you think like other procedures, you know, one can decide that, okay, FNA, FNB is good, we can do the EUS, we can do part of the job and we really don't want to, because a lot of accessories and things are required. These procedures have high failure, they also have higher complication risks. So before embarking on something like that, you need to ensure that you have all the right tools and of course the experience. What would you say about that?
Yes, I think you already mentioned clearly that I think intervention in US are fraught with risks, and therefore, my own personal opinion, I think unless I think the centers are prepared to manage risk, okay, I think then they should not embark upon this sort of thing, because in every published series we know on interventional EUS, even in expert centers, I think there are a lot of risks. So I think if they are not prepared or they don't know how to actually manage those risks, I think it's better not to do it. And then there are alternatives to intervention EUS. It's not as if there's no alternatives. I think we can always use a PTC and so forth. So I think it's a question of, I think, whether we are mature enough to actually handle this risk at this stage. I think new accessories are coming up. I think in the old days, I think you know about even pseudocyst drainage. In the old days, we used to have to dilate, and that was the key reason why complication occur is because of dilation, and also we could not actually access it. So nowadays with the axial stent, I don't know whether you have it, a hot axial stent. It's only 2 minutes. Okay, I just did one last week. They say 2 minutes, you finish. So I think this thing now is still very expensive, but with time it will become cheaper and so forth. So why risk it? You see, I think new things will keep coming up like the old days. I think when we started with EUS, I think yeah, the accessories are more mature. So I think with that sort of thing, I would say that I think if you are not prepared to manage your risk, it will happen. Okay, risks will happen. Then I think we should not do it. Okay, unless you are prepared to handle the risk. The same with ESD. I think if you're not prepared to handle bleeding and perforation, then you can't do it. Yeah.
Lawrence, there's a question from the audience that how much time period is required for training to go through each step from the observation to an on-patient training in a high-volume center?
Yes. So I think it depends on what procedure we're talking. Say, if I think a simple EUS and so forth, I think the number of procedures, I think in order to become competent, generally is between 100, I think, to 150. So I think the FNA is additional another 25 to 50. So depending on which society guidelines we are looking at. So that's where I think and this sort of this is on hands-on practice. Then observation, so will be another added maybe about I think observation another maybe 20, 25 observation before you can actually touch it. So I think if you want to go from one stage to the next, I think this is the kind of numbers we're talking about.
Also, if I can add, Lawrence, you know, it's also how much control you have, because the position in US changes with very slight movements. So it's also getting that control beforehand before you embark upon the therapeutic procedures. I think it's important to have that steady hand. It takes a little while for
Yeah.
for the for a person who started doing it to come to that stage where he can maintain the position. Sometimes it's not that easy. So I think maybe, you know, it also depends on people. So some people may take longer.
Yeah.
But these models I've seen Vinay's model. I've also seen Professor he
Yeah.
does, you know, you know, they're pretty good models for understanding the concept, because I think they don't give you a feel of what actually happens, because when you're in the real life it's very different.
Yeah.
But still, at least you can run through the motions and the steps that you need to do in different questions. There is a question here. Is there a training facility for FCPS training, doing EUS while doing the training and like upper GI. And so I think if I can say for a Pakistani thing perspective is that while you're being trained in the general GI, I think you can be exposed to EUS, but training in EUS at that time I don't think would be possible. So this should be a separate fellowship.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't know
no,
if you want to add
agree.
anything, Gayas and Lawrence, you want to add?
Yeah, no, no, I agree absolutely. I think EUS and ERCP are considered, I think, advanced. They are not usually taught during the normal fellowship. Even in US, in our center in Singapore as well. So we only pick certain people to continue on the training after they finish the usual so-called fellowship. And again, I think that I'd like to kind of emphasize on the previous point. I think the numbers I mentioned are only threshold numbers. So they don't actually, they are just a minimal threshold. Then the rest, I think, for a person to, I think, to advance to the next stage, it really depends on a number of factors. I think apart from numbers, numbers is just a bad thing. So you also need to know whether the guy understand what they are doing, and then whether they have good skills, eye-hand coordination, that sort of thing. So I think that sort of thing where you really have to have the trainer looking at the person, observe the person whether they're up to doing on or not. Okay.
And from the College of Physician and Surgeon perspective as well, the curriculum says that just an exposure to the US, meaning by the observership, is good enough. They should be able to understand the images of the US, but nothing more than that. And that too, just a basic level. And the other post-education institutes, UHS curriculum also dictates exactly the same. So I fully endorse Professor Lawrence's views that uh, ERCP, US, EST, EMA, these are advanced procedures. And one is not expected in the primary fellowship program to have an in-depth knowledge about this or the understanding or expertise of this. If they're good in the upper GI, lower GI, and other basic GI stuff, I think that's good enough as far as the training requirement is concerned from the fellowship point of view.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
So can you unmute Dr. Asad Naqvi? He's also here.
Hello, hi, hello, Assalamualaikum.
Well,
Thank you very much. I've just joined a little bit late, but I think it looks like
Hi,
an
Dr.
excellent.
Asif. How are you?
Hello, hi, how are you?
I'm
Good
good.
good to watch you and see your presentation. Excellent, and I think I'm at the moment in UK. Just came. I was in Lahore, but it came a couple of weeks ago, and I just wanted to essentially really ask one question and just also take the opportunity to just let you know about this is for the all my colleagues in Pakistan, about one activity which is happening in the under the auspices of Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Glasgow. But firstly, I just wanted to ask from Saad and Riaz, obviously you are a leader over here in relation to EUS. Are we making a kind of a, now have you an idea about how many centers that we are doing EUS, and are you trying to put a structure to the availability of EUS in Pakistan? And particularly, I think obviously spans so many other areas in terms of staging and so on. Can you say something about that? And then I will just want to make you aware about the other thing, which I can do later on. If you could kindly answer that question for my information and also, the information of our guest.
Sure.
I can answer about Sindh, and we have 7 centers now in Sindh that are doing that are providing EUS. Some obviously more, and some less. In fact, 8 centers in Sindh. Most of them are almost all of them are in Karachi, barring one. And Riaz can answer about the north.
recently for a review article, we had gathered the data through the pharmaceutical suppliers from the endoscope manufacturer suppliers across the country, and they're supplied endoscopic equipment at 22 sites. So essentially, there are 22 sites who have got the endoscopic ultrasound facility available over there. So um, second, what level of endoscopic ultrasound are they performing? I'm sure few of them are providing an advanced degree, and few of them are just at the initial level. They may be needing lots of training, but from basic to advanced procedures and endoscopic ultrasound, I think a continuous exchange program between the expert centers to local centers in Pakistan will be required at all times, and that's how the things are likely to develop um, uh, in the coming days.
Thank you very much. Can I take advantage of just quickly 1 minute to just make you aware that on right now, Royal College of Physician and Surgeon is organizing a gastro meeting, which called Gastro 2020, and I think Adrian Stanley is, which I think has I think he has visited Pakistan. He's organizing that, and on 29th, which is happening now, there's one, I think they're doing 4-day session. There's one on Monday and Wednesday, 14th and 16th. But just one thing is that they want to do an international sort of symposia just for 2 hours on 29th of September, in which I think one of the person who is particularly has got a lot of experience and name here in EUS is called Ian Penman. I think probably you would know about him. And he is also going to be available there. And I was just wondering that maybe if this can be in some forum through Saad and Nayab, I can give you this more information if that can be locally circulated for the and I think it's going to be 3 people who will also be available for question answer session. And I think that's what I want to make you aware of.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Very good.
We'll love to.
Yeah, there was one question. There's one question, and that's come about twice. Is expertise in EUS directly proportionate to that in transabdominal ultrasound? Is there any advantage of learning transabdominal ultrasound before you do US or Lawrence?
Yeah, I think certainly I think there's an advantage, but I think in practice, most of us don't have this. I think this inherent advantage. So I think it's just a way where we will be a bit more focused because when we are doing EUS, we have a certain, I think, use cases, okay, which we can learn on and then become good in. So we are very focused on our use cases, and then we learn through these use cases without knowing everything about what the radiologists actually know. And this is important, and this is why I think if you look at it, I think how I think US has evolved to become such an indispensable tool nowadays is because of I think the introduction of many of these use cases, which people find are actually change their practice and then change the patient's outcome as well. So I think with that, obviously, I think comes the technology, and then becomes better and better because there's a so-called in the I think incentive for people to want to I think develop the technology further. So I think the use cases becomes why we are kind of saying that it's probably not essential for us to know how to do transabdominal ultrasound because we focus a lot on our advantages. Okay, what are our advantages in doing EUS? It's actually on the posterior organs, which the transabdominal people can't actually have such a good access. For instance, in pancreas, I think obviously I think we are much better in pancreas versus those people who do radiologists. You see, they can only see maybe make up a bit of the pancreas. I think maybe but whilst we can get a fantastic picture. So that's where I think with time it can become better. I believe we are better than that. in pancreatic EUS versus their thing. So I think there's certain things. I think biliary tract, they can't see the top end. Oh, sorry, they can't see the bottom end anyway. So that's where again we become better. So I'm trying to say that there's no, obviously if you know, you can see the liver a bit better, but I think it probably we will leave it, give liver to back to them. Okay. So I think yeah, we learn.
7 o'clock.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's already 7, and I'm really thankful to Lawrence for his time to close the session. I'm really thankful to Professor Lawrence for sparing time and providing us a very excellent learning opportunity on endoscopic ultrasound and what AG has been doing up till now, and what exactly AG can offer to the candidates in Pakistan. And I'm sure that AG will continue to cooperate with us and will give more opportunity to candidates from Pakistan for the training in endoscopic ultrasound in future. I'm really thankful to the participants for sparing their time, and I'm at the same time thankful to Wilson Pharmaceutical for giving us the platform to to telecast this webinar. And with this, very good evening to all of you, and have a very blessed weekend night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir, for this.